Well, as you can see, I have drawn my 3 sea nettles or jellyfish, and I am taping it down, making sure that my borders are nice and straight. I've actually taken to doing a 3/8 inch border. It's just wide enough to make sure that the tape keeps the paper nice and flat during painting and it doesn't peel off so easily. So I'm just measuring that to make sure that I have a nice straight edge, and I put my tape on those little marks and smooth it down well, or as you're painting it will peel off. And there you go, I'm just letting you know what size border I've put on there. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just wet down my watercolor paints a little bit, makes them easier to use, and then I'm going to wet the paper all over. Use one of your bigger brushes to do that, and make sure that it's not dripping wet, but make sure that everything gets some water on it. Now I'm taking a little cadmium yellow, or I like Aureolin Azo Yellow, but not everybody has that color. I'm pulling out a little bit of the yellow from the fronds that extend from the jellyfish, the sea nettle. I'm putting some cadmium orange around. I'm being very loose because this is just a very loose base layer for the color, and I don't want to go too dark at this point. You'll see when I get the blue on the background, you'll see that the jellyfish glows and looks a lot more translucent as it actually is in the ocean. Now I've got a little bit of cadmium red, and I'm going to just touch that in places to give a little bit of warmth to the body, the bell it's called, of the jellyfish. Now I'm going to let that dry, and I even use a hairdryer to make sure it's perfectly dry. I let it soak in first. The paint needs to soak into the paper, and the pigment needs to get down there into the grain of the paper before you use your hairdryer. Now I am wetting those long white fronds because I want those to be fuzzy when I put the background paint on. I want them to have really soft fuzzy edges, and if I need to keep re-wetting those as I paint, then I will. I'm taking some ultramarine blue, and I've also mixed up some phthalo blue, nice intense blue, and I've also mixed up a mixture of the two of them. So sometimes I'm going to be using the ultramarine blue, and sometimes the phthalo blue, and sometimes the mix. And when I get close to the bell of the jellyfish, I'm going to be very, very careful to go around there and leave a nice crisp edge. But when I get to those little white fronds, I want them to be a very fuzzy, soft edge. And I'm just touching my brush into the jellyfish edge there because it's sort of fluted. You have to work fairly quickly so that your paint doesn't dry and go streaky, and you need to make sure that you're always dipping into those puddles of lovely, juicy, rich, pigment-rich paints. Don't try and make them last and get more and more washed out with them. You need to really keep them nice and pigmented and deep. This is the complementary color. We've got yellowish, orangey jellyfish, and then complementary blue makes them look so beautiful. And if my fronds there are getting too dry, I just have to wet them up a little bit more. And I can also lift a little bit of the paint out later if I need to. And I go round slowly when I'm near the bell of the jellyfish, so I get a nice curved edge. This is really tricky because if your paint dries out too much, or if the parts dry out too much that you want to be wet, you can get lines and all kinds of things. Now I am letting the water dribble through that semi-wet paint, and usually that's a no-no. Usually you get what's called a bloom, which you don't want, but we actually want blooms when we're doing this because it looks like the fronds that, I forget what they're called actually, oral something, those long white bits that come out of the jellyfish. And actually that is where the female jellyfish stores her fertilized eggs, in those fronds, until they hatch and then they go off and stick to a rock somewhere. And then they reproduce themselves. The little eggs, they clone themselves when they've gone off and hatched. They have 2 ways of reproducing. So I've edited that a little bit, and I've gone in, and now I'm putting a wet brush where I want a few more fronds. Up here, up at the top, I made a mistake. I didn't wet that before I started painting, so I'm fixing my mistake by washing out some of that blue and making some more fronds coming from above. So no worries. Now, my jellyfish, now I can judge if they're too pale or not, and I feel they're a little bit too pale. I want to put a little bit more colour, a little bit more cadmium yellow on there. Do you see I wet it first though, because I want it to be very soft. And then I'll get a little bit of the orange, cadmium orange or transparent orange, and I'll make one side much bolder, darker, stronger colour. And I make sure that I'm going to mix that in with a wet brush so that it blends into the yellow and the unpainted area. And just see it pops a little bit now. But you have to be very careful not to go too dark with that, otherwise your value of your orange will be the same value as your blue, and it will lose its luminosity. And remember, the jellyfish is translucent. Its body is completely translucent, so you want to indicate that with your paint. This is where I've gone to a smaller brush. I think this is a size 4 round brush, and I'm painting more carefully, wetting that area first. That will give it nice soft edges, make it look round. And again, I'm going to put a little bit of yellow, cadmium yellow, or if you like, Azo Yellow, and then cadmium orange, or I prefer transparent orange. It's a more beautiful transparent orange, more transparent than cadmium orange. I'm adding a little bit of cadmium red to the orange mix to warm up the other edge, and I'm starting to put a little bit of the shape and shadow underneath the jellyfish there. And there's one more to do. And I'll do the same thing to the third one. Wet the area that I want to keep light with nice soft round look to it. And then a little bit of yellow, just a little bit. And that bit of that orange that I've added some cadmium red to, and I put a little bit more orange in the mix to strengthen it up. And if you put too much colour down, you can just suck it back up again with a thirsty brush. A little bit of cadmium red on the bottom, around those little fronds there. And we're almost done. The sea nettle also has 24 stinging tentacles that come out from each of those little, don't know what you call those little bits I'm painting now. Those little areas I'm painting now, each one has a stinging tentacle that comes out. They come out from several feet, they can be several feet long, and that's what they sting their prey with. They eat all kinds of little ocean creatures, shrimps and snails and things. And if they sting a human, they will hurt. I don't think, unless you're allergic to them, I don't think they're deadly, but you certainly wouldn't want to have one of those tentacles wrapped around your leg. I am mixing a beautiful dark brownish red to paint those. I mixed alizarin crimson with some cadmium red and a bit of the orange and some burnt sienna, and I vary it because where there's light on those tentacles, they're a lighter orangey red, and then where they're in shade, they're very dark. You need a lot more alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. And you can have fun having these sort of flowing all over the place. Some of them wrap themselves around that white piece in the middle go in and out, some over the top of the other jellyfish. It almost looks like a parachute, like where it comes off there, looks like all these little ribbons have been sewn to the edge of the parachute. And like I said, each one of these sea nettles has 24 of these stinging tentacles. You don't need to make sure that you paint all 24 in, but you can paint quite a few of them. And I had some fun. And the last thing I'm putting on there is some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, to just pick up a few more areas of white on there that are a little sharper than the soft ones. And then we'll be done. And I think the key to this is to make sure the white areas are wet before you put that blue paint on there. And make sure your orange is not too dark, so you have a different value to the blue. And then you'll have some beautiful Pacific sea nettles. And you've probably seen them in aquariums. They are very happy in aquariums, and they look very beautiful in the tanks. And I'm adding just a little bit more blue there. And just a few more divisions between those little white fronds. And a few shadows under the jellyfish. These little details you can fiddle forever at the end, putting extra little details in, and sometimes that's when you do your best little areas with a small brush. And I'm just, as I sharpen up some of those lines, it just gives it a little bit more definition. And if you don't want definition, then that's absolutely fine. Okay, thank you for watching.